Welcome to Building Fortunes Radio. Make sure you check us out at buildingfortunesradio.com. Along with our marketing partners, we're here to help our PM Marketing Network Leads customers build their businesses and make the world a better place. At Building Fortunes, we know how much your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world. Now on to our show with your host, Peter Mingils.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingils here. You're listening to Building Fortunes Radio on www.buildingfortunesradio.com. So if you're here listening in live, thanks for being here. If you are listening and you're still alive, you probably found that we actually archive a lot of our radio shows on buildingfortunesradio.com. And if you're unfamiliar with the site, when you click on that, you'll be able to see all these different segments of all of these different people, past, present, and then, of course, future. And when we do a live show, what we do is we actually record it, host it, and then put it up on our radio show so you can find the link if you wanted to be able to send that link to somebody else. Or, of course, you do the social networking buttons, where you can like and share and all that sort of stuff that people do when they want to send this to their friends. So I always welcome people to listen in live. On every Friday, I host a radio show with one of several different types of people. Today we have David Ritchie, and I'm going to let David explain a little bit about himself and what he does in a second. But I built Building Fortunes Radio as a platform to be able to have an open and honest discussion about certain things that are going on in the industry. And we'll find people that champion the industry. We'll find some people that want to warn people about the industry. In this special segment on this one, we usually talk to the people that are a little bit more sophisticated. So we try to stay away from the triple Gs. And I'll explain what that is in a second. But we work with people that probably want to know more about the industry. Where are the potholes? What are the rules and regulations? What should we be watching for? And this is the type of stuff that if I would have known this before, I probably would have done things differently, kind of a radio show. So I brought along with us before, we've had Roger Van Vlissingen, who's a good guy and an author on seekingalpha.com. Who's right now kind of preoccupied with his own business and not worrying so much about MLM. Then there's E. Robert Smith, who is a really great gentleman who also wrote a book called Downline. You can find it on Amazon. And he sometimes frequents our calls if he's not in the middle of doing something. And then we also have Dave Ritchie. And David is a really good guy who runs a website that's being put up again, and he'll give you that information as we go. And we always talk about some of the things that are happening in the industry as well as some of the things you really want to know about on this specific call. So thanks for being here on Building Fortunes Radio. David Ritchie, over to you. Tell us a little, first of all, welcome for being here, and then you can introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll jump into some of this week's topics.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
You're welcome.
What were the three Gs you were mentioning?
The triple Gs. The triple Gs. They are, ready? Here we go. Because I had to think of a way to remember, like, what is it that happens when people do goofy things? So the first one is goofy. The second one is greedy. And the third one is gullible. So goofy, greedy, and gullible. Usually, if you start to take a look at, I'm a little bit of a Napoleon Hill follower. So, Think and Grow Rich, and think about the Peter principle where people rise to the level of incompetence. And I always wondered why smart people do stupid stuff and why leaders fail and all that sort of stuff. Why would Bill Clinton do the stuff that Bill Clinton does, or why would somebody do the stuff that they do? And in the MLM industry or the business world, I kind of had to put a label on it, and I came up with the triple Gs. I used to call it the double Gs for a long time. And then I heard the word gullible, so I kind of added that because that really does fit. So I went from double to triple Gs. People that are goofy, those, to give you a description of that, like they're in everything that passes their desk. They're the shiny object syndrome. Oh, I'll do this and I'll do that, and I have this going on over here, and I have this going on over here, and I have this going on, and that's just goofy. And then there's the greedy, which was, if I could put in $100, I get whatever. But if I could put in 1,000, I get whatever. And if I could put in 10,000, I'll be rich even before anything ever happens. So that's the greedy. So a little bit of greed appeals to it. And then you have the gullible. And the gullible, I say, with a little bit of an affectionate feeling, because they're nice and they are trying to help, or trying to do something that's right, but they're just, how do you say, a little bit on the gullible side, maybe a little bit positively or whatever, naive. So more easily influenced or more easily trusted and then certainly taken advantage of. So those are my triple Gs.
Well, not to be critical, Peter, but I like to use a little less pejorative terminology for the first and last ones. The first one, I would say, are unwise. And the last one, which is what my involvement was around, was what you call gullible, I call credulous. Mm-hmm. And in my observation, that is by far the leading reason that people get into multi-level marketing or anything that's not that you really can't figure out how it works. So they'll believe anything that anybody tells them. And it's really unfortunate, but a large portion of our society is just not equipped to think critically, which is the opposite of being credulous. Right.
Makes sense. So I think we get the essence of each one. I think common ground a little bit, the essence of each one with the description. But it's easy for me to remember the triple Gs.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yep.
And ordinarily, I wouldn't object. So
so a clarification. But everybody gets a chance to use their own definition. So you kind of, how would you describe whatever, and then there you go. You can customize your description because it really does fit all across the board. However, only because I'm on the lead generation side, so I hear the people that call me up and they say, I want to build my business. And I was talking to my upliner, I was doing this, and I say, what have you been doing? I kind of get a chance to dissect them. So it's there's a lot of really good people out there that just really need some help. And I think, well, not that I think, I know that's why I do this radio show, so we can air the issues or the dirty laundry. And then some people might say, well, I don't want to play with that. And I would say, that's fine, but at least you know about that. And then other people say, well, good, I'm glad you showed me where the potholes were or where the poop was so I could understand it and maneuver around it as opposed to get caught up in it. So that's why we do this Building Fortunes radio show. But you have a unique scenario of your story that we don't have to replay it here, but for those people listening in, make sure you check out one of the very first segments I ever did with Dave Ritchie, because he explained at length some of the challenges that happened with his own personal situation, and it is certainly worth listening to. So I always ask people to make sure you check out that very first Building Fortunes radio show with Dave Ritchie, because you'll hear about the cult-like challenges, the misguidedness sometimes, and the challenges that happen in people's lives, and eventually even some compromising situations where it might even lead to some people's demise. So over to you, David. So what did you first of all, I got to say this. You announced a little bit of good news when we were off the air coming on, that you were recognized by someone. So let's do a little bit of backslapping, if you will, or praise for whatever it is that just happened to you. So what was it that just happened with you?
Well, Roger Van Vlissingen published an article on Seeking Alpha this week, and he posted a link to my story, and the volume of visitors to the six web pages where the story is split up in 6 parts, all saw quite an increase in traffic for a couple of days. So that's good.
Very nice. So explain what that is, because there's a lot of people that would probably want to learn that as well. So how do we find it?
The URL is RealScam, RealScam.com. If you Google that and Google 10 promises along with it, in other words, use those 2 search terms, RealScam.com and 10 promises, you'll probably be taken to the 6th part in the 6-part series. And I would encourage anybody who takes the time to read the story to start with part 1. There will be a link to part 1 at the very bottom left of the page that you land on.
And when you said scam, did you want us to type in 2 M's or 1?
Just 1. This is a website that's run by somebody else. It's a fairly small audience website, so I'm actually quite astonished at the amount of traffic that the story has gotten in the past 2 years. Chapter 6 has gotten over 8,600 page views.
Wow, nice. Okay,
yeah.
Good. And then when we went there, give us the thumbnail of what we would see when we go there.
Well, what you'll see, do you want me to just briefly outline the story
Sure, absolutely.
of my ex and her son? Okay. In 2003, I had been retired from my career in paramedicine for about 5 years. And I was on my own, and a friend of mine from college called me one day and asked me if I'd like to meet her at a opportunity meeting for the multi-level marketing company, or she would call it network marketing company, that she was with at the time. And so I went with her. And in the course of our visit, discovered that she and her husband had split, and she was having some struggles with her kids. So I was always looking for something to do, and because she was a friend and I didn't have any reason to stay homebound at that time, I came up to where she lived and stayed in a guest room at her house, kind of to help her with the kids and encourage her and help her with her business. Well, one thing led to another, and we ended up in a romantic relationship. And over the course of our 8.5 years together, she was involved serially with 3 different MLMs. Really worked her butt off. And interestingly, she was, first of all, valedictorian of her high school graduating class, so she doesn't come under the first G category. She had a great character, so she didn't come under the G category. And so clearly she falls into the third one, which is she was credulous. And so, you know, she constantly believed the hype that she was going to make the break and start exceeding break-even income in the very next business period, which was like basically once a month, or actually every 13. There are 13 business periods in a year. I won't get into that. But at any rate, she never did achieve that goal. And in my view, looking back, the most important reason was that she was in a market that was saturated. And there was no way for her to know that. And that's become the focus of my own work at this point, is trying to get a handle on what I call blinded recruitment. She didn't have the advantage of knowing how saturated the market was, so she spun her wheels for the first 4 years we were together, trying to make it go, and never did get on top of it. There are other reasons that there are difficulties as well. Pay plan breakage is one serious problem. You have to make a certain number of sales, or I should say generate enough downline purchases to qualify to even get a commission on what you sell. So that came into play as well. At any rate, she finally saw the light with that company and followed some friends into another network marketing company. That lasted about a year, and interestingly, her friends had earned, it turns out, the use. Initially, they billed it as having won a car, but they got the use of the used Mercedes-Benz for a year. Well, it turned out that they hadn't really earned that the use of that Mercedes. It was a PR ploy on the part of the company to maximize their recruiting success that they had not yet achieved. So one thing led to another. They told a couple of really interesting stories. One was that that they had done really well, but their downline members had not. So they were going to get out for that reason. Then it turned out that the whole thing, the story about how they got the Mercedes came up, and that's what they settled on as their reason for leaving. So instead of getting out of the business, and I talked to these people a couple of times about, hey, let's do something else together. And there was just no dissuading them. Anyway, they went to a third network marketing company, and my ex followed them right into that. And it was just the same noise, the same nonsense repeated. And it finally got bad enough. Our losses were mounting to an extent that I could no longer sustain them. She was losing money instead of making money. And I ended up having to file bankruptcy in 2010, Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which brings a whole different dynamic into the picture in that bankruptcy doesn't affect just me. It didn't affect just her. What it affected was my creditors as well. Now, Peter and I disagree with this, but my understanding is that harm actually extends to every creditworthy person in the service areas of the creditors that I had and discharged in terms of elevated interest rates. So there was that piece, and then there was the piece of, and this was probably as astonishing as anything that happened. I finally confessed to my ex-wife, filed bankruptcy, and she had a flash of about 5 seconds where she just fell into tears and said, "How could I be so selfish and self-centered?" And that was gone, just like the snap of the fingers, and it was gone. And that was the last time I saw her show a side of concern for me. So at any rate, a few months before that, after I'd filed the bankruptcy, I told her, I said, "Sweetheart, you're going to have to make a decision sometime soon between multi-level marketing and me." And she said, "Well, if that's my choice, see ya." So I foolishly stuck around for another 3 months. But we'd been struggling and counseling with trying to convince my ex to formulate a household budget, first of all, and secondly, rationalize her business. She was also a piano teacher. The hope was that she would see that she was losing way too much money in network marketing and get out of it. But that wasn't the choice she made. As it turned out, she never did do any of that. And the final straw was I had taken a trip to the big city near where we lived to see some friends and take care of business. And when I got back, there was a car parked out in front of the house. It was unfamiliar. Well, I thought it was probably just a new piano student or, somebody else. Went into the house, nobody was there. And I looked out, and my ex was getting out of this car. She came in the house all excited. And I said, "What's up?" She said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe where I've been and what happened." I said, "Well, tell me." And with the first words out of her mouth, I was completely crushed and angered. She said, "I just checked out a new network marketing company." And I didn't even stay to listen to the rest of it. I turned on my heel, walked out of the house, and found a place to cool off for a while. Well, we talked about it. She didn't understand the issue that I had with it. And finally, I awoke at about 2 o'clock one morning. And all the realizations started coming in. What I had done to myself in terms of giving up my own personal ethics in order to support my ex in this business, what she had become. And it was something that I realized that I couldn't tolerate anymore. I gained a ton of weight. I was really quite obese. I'd started smoking again, and I was just constantly depressed. So I crawled out of bed very quietly, left her sleeping, packed up a suitcase, took a shower, wrote her a letter, came back into the bedroom and kissed her goodbye while she was still asleep, and left. The worst part of this story is that part of what my ex learned, and she came by it honestly from her family of origin as well, but she had a real affinity for dietary supplementation, and that's something that's worth another discussion. Peter, I don't know if you saw the PBS piece on supplementation and safety that was broadcast a week ago.
I didn't see it, no.
It's available online. It's quite an eye-opener. At any rate, her son was diagnosed shortly before I left with high-functioning schizophrenia. And he had been to this, well, I'm going to get in too deep in all of this, but as an indirect result.
That's okay. You can expand upon it. That's fine.
Okay. Well, part of what Candy, my ex, was encouraged to do was to attend a self-help seminar that was run by a group that has no expertise, no credentialing, no training in any sort of mental health profession. And part of the program, the whole idea is to completely obliterate any previous inhibitions you've had from your life. And very similar to basic training in the military, where you learn to follow orders without question, where you learn that to be able to do the things you have to do in combat without intolerable guilt. And it's all for a higher purpose. Well, this is all very similar to that. The problem is there was no supervision, no monitoring by a mental health professional. Well, my ex's son, with his schizophrenia, was not screened out of the program. And he was asked, 4 years after he went to the initial seminar, he was asked to help staff a seminar near his home. And it was a weekend deal, and he accepted. And while he was there, he began to call his mother very upset, with sort of an irrational concern that he had shared too much of his own conflicts with his family, with the people he was there to serve. And as the weekend progressed, he called her more and more frequently. He was reading the group heads, and I call him the cult leader, his manifesto obsessively, trying to figure out, where to go from here. And while all this was happening, nobody at that seminar had the slightest idea that he was having a psychotic break. Well, the day after he got home, he was definitely delusional and talking quite a line to his girlfriend. And they shared a home in the town where they were going to school. And she called her dad, who owned the house where they lived, and he showed up and told my ex's son's name was Ethan. Told Ethan, you're going to have to find someplace else to live until you get some help. So Ethan called his mom. By now she was out of town helping her son-in-law and daughter. He had some surgery, so she was helping take care of their baby. And Ethan called her and said, Mom, what do I do? And she said, well, son, you can move into my place, no problem. Stay as long as you need to until your situation stabilizes. Well, that was the last time he ever talked to anybody in his family. He showed up at the house, and the roommate not the roommate, the gal that was taking care of my ex's menagerie, showed up, and she found Ethan sitting in the front room reading the cult leader's manifesto out loud like he was preaching a sermon. She greeted him. She said, "Hi, Ethan, how are you doing?" And with that, he set the book down, face down on the coffee table, and pulled out a small caliber handgun, pressed it against his neck, and she, of course, dashed out of the house to go next door and call 911, and she heard what she thought was a gunshot. And ran next door, called 911. When the police got there, Ethan had indeed taken his brainstem out and died instantly, fortunately. No more suffering. And it just, it broke my ex's heart. It broke my heart. I'll never forget that evening when I got a call from her. I was living in another community trying to rebuild my life. And through sobs that I could barely understand her when she told me what happened. But this young man had tremendous promise. He was a wonderful, wonderful kid. He was 23 years old at the time. And just so much potential. And he really didn't have to die. The heartbreak of it is that the only reason he died is because somebody that took charge of his mind didn't understand that he was having a psychotic break. He didn't have to die because with targeted pharmaceutical therapy and counseling, he could have dealt with his illness. But the industry that his mother was involved in pushed other options as solutions. So this very precious young man died unnecessarily. And that's the prime driver behind what I do now. In fact, he always wore a ball cap. I've never worn headgear as a matter of course. He always wore a ball cap. Didn't matter where he was. If he went to church, he had his ball cap on. If he was at school, his ball cap was on. He had it on until he laid down in his bed at night and put it back on as soon as he got up. So in his memory, I wore a ball cap every day, everywhere I go. And that offers some comfort. So that's the story in a nutshell.
It's a sad story, but I'm glad that you told the story so other people can kind of recognize some of those challenges. Too many times, like you had said, people practice medicine without a license. And in essence, that's what happens sometimes with these self-proclaimed gurus, educators, whatever we want to call them, coaches sometimes, thought leaders, whatever the vernacular they want to, or label they want to throw on them. And I think this is an important component that needs to be identified, that those things happen. And maybe something else might have triggered it, but it was certainly triggered by this, and he might not have ever had any of those challenges if he was just told to sell a product. If he was told to sell a product and sponsor some salespeople and do the same thing, which is really what he would have gotten paid for, as opposed to go in there and try to indoctrinate them into this level of thinking. Well, David, we're running out of time. I really appreciate you sharing those experiences. We'll talk about whatever's happening in the industry some other time, but I really, really, really appreciate you sharing this story on this radio show. And, guys, we're out of time, so you listen to David Ritchie. Make sure you type in, if you want to go read some of this, you go to Google or search engine. Type in real scam and then 10 promises, and you'll be able to find that excellent article. And, David, thanks for being here. We're going to catch you guys next time.
Peter,
thanks, everyone.
Peter.
Yes, sir.
Peter.
Yep.
The title of the story is 10 Promises, like the metal.
10.
Not
T-I-N. Perfect. Thank you very much for the clarification.
Yeah.
Yep. So T-I-N promises. So go check out real scam 10 as in T-I-N promises. Thank you, David. We're running out of time. We're going to catch you next time. See you next week if you can.
You've been listening to Building Fortunes Radio on buildingfortunesradio.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check us out every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for the designated Building Fortunes Radio segment with Peter Mingils. Be sure to check out the buildingfortunesradio.com website for our featured segments. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. At Building Fortunes Radio, we wish you the success you deserve and are willing to work for. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world.